Welcome, friend. I'm Jack, host of the channel, and today we're diving into another episode. Pour yourself a drink and get comfortable, because I've got a powerful story coming your way. If something hits deep, drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's get into it.
It was supposed to be just another Friday. I had worked late and came home to an empty house, which wasn't unusual. Megan had texted earlier, telling me she was going out with her friends. I didn't bother responding. What was the point? We'd had the same argument for weeks now. I told her I didn't like her going out drinking with her single friends until God knows what hour, especially when she always came back half out of her mind. She'd do that thing where she'd laugh in my face, all fake sweetness, like I was the controlling husband for having concerns. "You're just being dramatic," she'd say, flipping her hair like I didn't know what I was talking about. But this night, something felt off. I don't know if it was the silence of the house or the way the air felt heavy, like some tension was brewing. I sat on the couch for hours, not really watching TV, just staring at the door. Part of me expected her to blow in like a storm at her usual 3 a.m., but she didn't. It got later and later, and there was no sign of Megan. At some point I texted her, "Where are you?" No answer. Then I called, straight to voicemail. I told myself she was probably too drunk to check her phone, but my gut told me something else, something that made the back of my neck prickle, like I already knew how bad things had gotten, but I couldn't face it yet. It was around 6 a.m. when I finally heard something, keys fumbling outside the door. My heart stopped for a second. I stayed frozen on the couch, not sure if I wanted to stand up or stay right where I was. The door creaked open, and there she was, crawling on her hands and knees through the doorway. Megan, my wife, was crawling. Her dress was twisted, her hair a mess, and she reeked of sweat, alcohol, and something else that made my stomach turn. She didn't even see me at first. She was too busy struggling to push herself up, one stiletto still on her foot, the other lying abandoned in the hallway. I could barely believe what I was looking at. This wasn't the first time she'd come home drunk, but this was something else. She looked up, her eyes half-lidded, her lips curling into a sloppy smile like this was all a big joke. "Babe, I made it," she slurred, trying to get to her feet. She failed, collapsing against the doorframe, giggling like some college girl on spring break. I felt the anger rise up in my throat like bile. But it wasn't just anger. It was the kind of rage that comes when you've been ignoring a truth for too long, and it finally explodes in your face. I stood up, fists clenched, and she noticed me then. For a second, her expression shifted. Something like fear or maybe guilt flickered in her eyes before she quickly replaced it with that same dismissive smirk. "What? Don't look at me like that. I was just out with the girls." "With the girls?" I spat the words back at her. I couldn't even recognize my own voice. It was colder than I'd ever heard it. "You sure about that?" Megan's face twitched just for a moment, and I knew. There it was, the thing I'd been trying not to see for weeks, maybe months. Her smile faltered. She opened her mouth to speak, but hesitated, and that hesitation was everything. She tried to stand up again, but her legs wobbled like she could barely control them. Watching her struggle, something inside me snapped. I grabbed her arm and helped her up, though I couldn't even look at her. My mind was racing, connecting dots I didn't want to connect. She'd done this before, come home late, stumbling and laughing it off, but this time it was different. She was more disheveled than I'd ever seen her, more wrecked. I took a step back, keeping my voice low, cold. "Where were you really, Megan?" She blinked, rubbing her temples like she had a headache, clearly trying to gather herself. The act was almost pitiful. Almost. "I told you," she said slowly, dragging out the words as if explaining to a child. "I was out with the girls at the club. You know, nothing new." "At the club," I repeated, narrowing my eyes. "Funny, because I called Laura and Rachel. They were both home by midnight, so care to try again?" Her expression changed immediately. That smug, lazy grin vanished, replaced by a fleeting look of panic before she forced it back down. She turned away, trying to play it off. Okay, so maybe I stayed out later than they did. What's the big deal? You're seriously interrogating me about what time I got home." I felt my hands tighten into fists. She wasn't even trying to be convincing anymore, just tossing lies like I was supposed to catch them without question. "Megan, cut the bullsh. Who were you with?" She let out this half-hearted laugh, a sound that made my skin crawl. "You're insane, you know that? This is insane." She stumbled into the kitchen, grabbing a glass of water like that would magically make everything normal again. Like she wasn't wearing someone else's perfume. Like her lipstick wasn't smudged and I couldn't see the faint mark on her collarbone, half hidden by her hair. I followed her, not letting up. "You think I don't know? You think I'm some idiot who's just gonna stand here and believe whatever garbage you throw at me?" She whipped around, her eyes sharper now, defensive. "What the hell is that supposed to mean? Are you seriously accusing me of something? Because you're starting to sound like a paranoid psycho, Mike." That was it. That was the exact moment I knew. Her tone, her face. It was all too rehearsed, too practiced, like she had been waiting for this conversation, already armed with all the right words to throw back at me. But there was something she couldn't hide, and that was the way her hands were shaking as she gripped the edge of the counter. I walked over slowly, keeping my voice low enough to send a chill through the air. "Who were you with?" She threw her hands up, laughing again, but it wasn't real. "Jesus Christ, Mike, I don't know what's gotten into you, but you need to calm the fuck down. I told you I was with my friends. We drank too much, and now I'm home. That's it, that's all." I leaned closer, not breaking eye contact. "So what's this?" I pointed at her neck, at the faint, unmistakable bruise peeking out from under her hair. Her eyes went wide for a fraction of a second before she pulled her hair down to cover it, her mouth moving too fast, stumbling over her words. "It's nothing. I must have bumped into something at the club. You know how packed those places get." "Right," I said, the word dripping with disbelief. "You bumped into something." We stood there locked in this unbearable silence. She was trying to keep her cool, but I could see her unraveling. I could see the mask slipping, and that's when it hit me. I didn't need her to say it. I already knew. "Why don't you just admit it, Megan?" I whispered, my voice almost too calm. "You've been fucking someone else, haven't you?" Her face froze. She couldn't hide it this time. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For once, she didn't have a clever response. No fake laugh, no quick lie, just silence. And that silence was louder than anything she could have said. That silence felt like everything we had built was crashing down, brick by brick. Megan stood there, staring at me like a deer caught in headlights. The defiance drained from her face, and for the first time that night, I saw it. The truth she had been trying so hard to hide. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "There it is. You can't even deny it, can you?" She swallowed, her eyes darting around the room like she was looking for an escape route. There was none. She had nowhere to run, no way to twist her way out of this one. Slowly, she leaned back against the counter, crossing her arms over her chest, her lips tightening into a thin line. I didn't mean for this to happen, Mike," she finally muttered, her voice shaky but not with regret. "No, it was something else. Fear of getting caught, fear of facing the consequences." "Didn't mean for what to happen," I snapped, my voice louder now, echoing off the walls. "What exactly did you not mean to happen, Megan? The lying, the sneaking around, or screwing some other guy while I've been sitting at home like a goddamn fool?" Her face hardened at that, like my words had slapped her. For a second she looked like she was going to deny it again, but then she didn't. Instead, she took a deep breath, rolling her eyes like this was all some exhausting inconvenience. "Look, it's not what you think, okay? You're blowing this way out of proportion." I blinked at her, stunned by her audacity. "I'm blowing this out of proportion? Are you seriously trying to gaslight me right now?" She pushed herself off the counter and walked toward me, her heels clicking on the floor like she was still in control of the situation. Her whole demeanor shifted. "Mike, we've been drifting apart for months. You barely look at me anymore. All you do is work, come home, and act like I'm just here. What did you expect me to do?" I stared at her, my pulse racing, unable to believe what I was hearing. "You're blaming me for this? Because I've been working? So that's your excuse? You found someone else because I've been distant? Is that what you're saying?" She huffed, flipping her hair back with this careless gesture that made me want to scream. "I'm saying things haven't been good between us for a while. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have felt the need to." "To what? Spread your legs for someone else?" The words came out before I could stop them, and I instantly saw the flash of anger in her eyes. But I didn't care. Not anymore. I was done pretending, done playing the clueless husband. Her face twisted, all that fake sweetness replaced by something much uglier. You know what? Yeah, I did. I slept with someone else. Are you happy now? You wanted the truth, there it is. What are you going to do about it? My heart stopped. She said it so easily, like confessing to borrowing my car without asking, not admitting she had destroyed the trust I had in her. My vision blurred with rage, my chest heaving as I tried to process the words. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even pretending to be sorry. I stepped closer, my voice shaking. Who is he? She looked away, biting her lip as if she was debating how much to tell me. But when she met my eyes again, her smirk was back. Does it really matter? It's not like you know him. The way she said it, so dismissive, so cruel, made something snap inside me. Of course it fucking matters, Megan, I roared. Tell me who the hell you've been seeing behind my back. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing like she was sizing me up. Then, with the calmest voice I've ever heard her use, she said, It's Ryan. I felt the floor shift beneath me. Ryan, my best friend, the guy who stood next to me at our wedding, the guy who was always around, always offering to help, always there with some stupid grin on his face, acting like everything was perfectly normal. I stumbled back, gripping the edge of the table for support. Ryan? You've been sleeping with Ryan? The words felt like poison in my mouth. She shrugged like it was nothing. It just happened. He actually listens to me, you know? He cares, unlike you. There it was again, that sneer, that smug look, like she was proud of herself for confessing, like she expected me to just accept it. I could feel my fists shaking, my whole body trembling with fury, betrayal, disbelief. My mind raced through every memory, every time Ryan had been at the house, every joke, every shared beer. It was all a lie. He had been a lie. She had been a lie. I took one long, deep breath, trying to steady myself, but nothing could stop the tidal wave of rage surging through me. Megan stood there, arms crossed, still wearing that cocky expression, waiting for me to react. She thought she had the upper hand, thought she could control the situation. But she had no idea. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The room spun. Ryan, my best friend. How long had this been going on? How many times had he been in my house, sitting on my couch sharing beers with me while he was secretly screwing my wife behind my back? I couldn't even speak for a moment, the rage clogging my throat. Megan just stood there, tapping her nails on the counter like she was waiting for me to move on, like she thought this was just some argument we'd eventually shrug off. She wasn't getting it. She wasn't feeling the weight of what she just admitted. I wanted to shake her, scream, do something to break that smug look off her face, but all I could do was stare at her, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When I finally found my voice, it came out strained, barely a whisper. How long? Megan didn't flinch. She didn't even pretend to feel guilty. Instead, she looked at me like I was asking a stupid question. Does it matter? She asked, her tone dripping with condescension. How long? I repeated louder this time, stepping closer. I could feel the rage building again, boiling just beneath my skin. She sighed like she was being inconvenienced, rolling her eyes. I don't know. A few months, maybe longer. She tilted her head, looking off into the distance as if trying to recall. Started sometime after that stupid work trip you took. You were gone, I was lonely, and well, you know how things go. I had to brace myself against the wall to keep from lunging at her. My knuckles were white from gripping the edge of the table so hard I thought it might break. I could feel my pulse in my temples, pounding like a war drum. A few months, I repeated, my voice trembling with disbelief. You've been screwing him for months, and you just, what? Thought you'd keep this little secret until I caught you crawling back through the door at 6 a.m. She shrugged again, like I was making too big a deal out of it. It's not like I planned for it to happen, Mike. It just did. I was feeling ignored, and Ryan was there. He listens to me, talks to me. He's not always stuck in his phone or glued to work. He actually cares about what I'm feeling. Her voice took on this nasty edge, like she was trying to twist the knife deeper. I mean, can you really blame me? Look at yourself. I blinked, not believing what I was hearing. Look at myself? Was she seriously trying to turn this on me? I pushed off the table and took a few steps toward her, my body shaking with anger I was struggling to control. So this is my fault now? I drove you to sleep with my best friend? That's the excuse you're going with? Megan's eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, she dropped the act. Her voice lowered to a sharp whisper. You think you're some victim in all this? You haven't been a husband to me in a long time, Mike. You're never here, and even when you are, it's like you're not really with me. All you care about is work, your career, whatever new project you're obsessing over. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here, wondering if you even see me anymore. She trailed off, a sly smile creeping onto her lips. And Ryan, he saw me. He made me feel something again. I snapped. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a glass on the table, and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, pieces flying everywhere. Megan flinched, but didn't move from her spot, her eyes wide with shock for the first time that night. Don't you dare stand there and act like this is my fault, I shouted, my voice echoing through the room. You made a choice. You had a million other ways to fix what was wrong, but you chose to betray me. You chose to crawl into bed with him. I was breathing hard, my chest rising and falling in rapid, angry bursts. Megan stared at the broken glass on the floor, her mouth slightly open, but she didn't say anything. Maybe she realized that pushing me any further wasn't a good idea. Maybe, for once, she was actually scared of what might happen next. The silence between us stretched on, suffocating. I couldn't stand to look at her anymore, but at the same time, I couldn't leave the room. There was something else gnawing at the back of my mind, something I had to know. Does he love you? I asked, my voice low, almost defeated. Megan hesitated for a second before crossing her arms and tilting her head to the side. I don't know, she said, shrugging again like it was a casual question. I guess maybe. He said he might. I felt like I'd been hit in the gut. She didn't even know. She had thrown our entire marriage away for a guy who might love her, who was willing to risk his best friend's trust for some fling. I wanted to scream, to throw more than just a glass. I wanted to tear the whole house apart, anything to match the destruction inside of me. But instead I just stood there, numb. You don't even know if he loves you, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. And you threw everything we had away for that? She didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at the floor, her arms wrapped around herself, as if she was finally feeling the cold of her own choices. The weight of everything hit me at once. The lies, the betrayal, the fact that the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with everything, had thrown it all away for nothing. For him. I couldn't even process it fully. My mind was blank, yet full of rage at the same time. I took one last look at her, and all I saw was a stranger. I can't do this, I muttered, turning toward the door. Where are you going? Megan called after me, her voice suddenly panicked for the first time that night. Maybe she finally realized I wasn't going to stand there and take it anymore. But I didn't answer her. I walked out of that room, out of the house, slamming the door behind me. The sound of breaking glass echoed in my ears. I don't know how long I drove. Maybe it was an hour, maybe 3. I barely registered the road, the streetlights flashing past like broken memories, the steering wheel clutched in my trembling hands. My mind was a blur of images. Megan's smirk, Ryan's face when he would joke with me, the nights she came home late, smelling like someone else. It was all too much, spinning around in my head like a storm I couldn't escape. I ended up in some parking lot, empty and desolate. The silence out there was suffocating, but at least it wasn't filled with her voice, her lies. I killed the engine and leaned back in the seat, trying to catch my breath. My chest felt heavy, like someone had tied weights to my ribs and was slowly tightening the knot. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking as I scrolled through the contacts. I hovered over Ryan's name, my thumb trembling. I couldn't believe I had been so blind. How many times had he been at my house, sitting at the table, drinking my beer, acting like everything was normal while he was screwing my wife behind my back? My stomach churned, but I pressed the call button anyway. It rang twice before he picked up, his voice too casual, too normal for what I knew now. Mike, what's up, man? It's early, everything okay? The sound of his voice sent a wave of nausea through me, but I kept my tone steady. Ryan, I said, fighting to keep my voice from cracking. I know. There was silence on the other end. The kind of silence that weighs heavy, like the calm before a storm. I could hear him breathing, but he didn't say anything at first. I let it hang there, waiting for him to either deny it or confess. But he wasn't stupid. He knew exactly what I was talking about. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, almost careful. Mike, man, I don't know what you're talking about. Cut the bullshit, Ryan, I snapped, my voice harsher than I intended. I know about you and Megan. I know everything. More silence. This time it lasted longer, and I could almost hear him scrambling for a response. Look, Mike, how long? I interrupted, not giving him a chance to weasel his way out. Just tell me how fucking long you've been screwing her. You know, he sighed, and I could hear the guilt in his breath. But there was something else, too. Something like relief, like he was glad it was out in the open now. A few months, he admitted, his voice low, almost like he was confessing to a traffic ticket, not the complete betrayal of our friendship. I didn't mean for it to happen, Mike. It just... don't. I cut him off again, my voice shaking with fury. Don't you dare give me that it just happened crap. You don't accidentally fall into bed with your best friend's wife. He was silent again. I could hear him breathing on the other end, probably trying to come up with something to say that would make this better. But nothing he said could fix this. Nothing could undo the fact that the two people I trusted most had gone behind my back, lied to me for months, and acted like everything was fine. Are you in love with her? I finally asked, my voice hollow. I didn't even know why I cared to ask. Maybe I needed to know just how deep this betrayal went. Was it just lust, or did he actually want to steal her from me entirely? Ryan hesitated. I could almost hear him wrestling with the answer, like he wasn't sure what to say. I don't know, Mike. Maybe. We never really talked about it like that. I laughed, but it was bitter and empty. The sound of someone at the edge of breaking. You don't know? Jesus, you've been sleeping with my wife for months, and you don't even know if you're in love with her? What the hell is wrong with you? He didn't respond. What could he say? There were no words that could make this right. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the leather creaking under my fingers. You should have just told me, Ryan. If you wanted her, if she wanted you, you should have just told me, instead of sneaking around like a couple of fucking cowards. I'm sorry, Mike, he finally whispered, but it was too late for apologies. It was too late for anything. I hung up before he could say anything else, tossing the phone into the passenger seat like it was burning my hand. The apology rang in my ears, but it didn't matter. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry he got caught. I sat there, staring out at the empty lot, the weight of everything pressing down on me harder than ever. The anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it was all swirling inside of me like a hurricane, and I didn't know which way to turn. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to tear down the whole damn world because nothing made sense anymore. Everything I thought I knew, my marriage, my friendship, it was all a lie. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white, trying to calm the storm inside me. But there was no calming it. This wasn't something I could just get over or fix with a few choice words. This was the kind of betrayal that left scars so deep they'd never heal. I didn't even realize the tears had started falling until I tasted salt on my lips. I wasn't crying for her or even for Ryan. I was crying for the life I thought I had, the future that was gone, ripped apart in a matter of hours. And now, sitting there alone in the dark, I had to make a choice. Stay and fight for something that was already dead, or walk away and never look back. But no matter what I decided, one thing was clear. My life, the one I thought I knew so well, was over. And there was no going back to the way things were. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. The thought of walking back into that house, seeing her again, smelling his cologne on her skin, it was like walking into a crime scene where the body was still warm. My entire world had shattered, and all I could think about was how easily they had done it, like I was some kind of background character in their little drama. I drove around for a while, not really paying attention to where I was going. My phone buzzed a few times, Megan, no doubt. I didn't look. What could she possibly say that would make any of this better? I didn't care about her apologies, her excuses, or her reasons. There was no reason good enough to justify what she had done. And Ryan, he was a ghost to me now. His voice still echoed in my head. I didn't mean for it to happen, Mike. That line played on repeat like some sick joke. Eventually, I ended up at home, not because I wanted to, but because there was nowhere else to go. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I saw the light on in the living room. the faint silhouette of Megan pacing back and forth inside, waiting. I sat in the car for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, trying to gather whatever strength I had left. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be war. When I walked inside, the air was thick, like the house itself knew what was coming. Megan looked up the moment the door clicked shut, her face a twisted mixture of guilt and irritation. She had changed out of her club clothes, now wearing one of those oversized sweaters she always wore when she was trying to act innocent. Her makeup was scrubbed off, but I could still see the smudges from her night out, the traces of her lies painted right on her skin. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice tense, as if I was the one in the wrong here. I ignored the question, walking past her and into the living room. I needed space, a buffer between us, so I wouldn't do something I'd regret. She followed me, of course, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, echoing louder than they should have in the silence. "Mike, we need to talk about this." I turned around so fast she took a step back. "Now you want to talk, after everything?" Her eyes flashed with annoyance, but she quickly masked it with that sweet, fake concern she was so good at. "I know you're angry, okay? I get that. But if we're going to fix this..." "Fix this?" I cut her off, laughing bitterly. "You think we can fix this? You've been screwing my best friend behind my back for months, and you think we can slap a Band-Aid on it and pretend it didn't happen?" She crossed her arms, the mask slipping for a second, letting the real Megan show. "Look, it's not like you've been the perfect husband. You're always working, always distracted. What did you expect me to do, Mike? Sit around and wait for you to notice me? I needed more." That was it. That was the last straw. I stepped toward her, my voice shaking with anger. "So you ran to Ryan? My best friend? Out of all the people in the world, you thought he was the answer to your problems? And you think that justifies this? You think that makes this my fault?" She didn't flinch. In fact, she straightened up, her eyes narrowing. "Maybe if you had been more of a husband to me, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere." The audacity, the sheer cold-blooded nerve. I couldn't even find the words for a second, my mind spinning from how quickly she turned everything around. "Needed you? Needed to cheat? That's your excuse?" She threw her hands up, frustrated now. "I'm not saying it's right, Mike, but you left me no choice. I was lonely, and Ryan, he was there." "Don't you dare say his name," I snarled, stepping closer. "Don't you dare bring him into this like he's some hero in your pathetic story. He's a piece of shit just like you." She opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. "I've worked my ass off to give us a life, to build something together. And what do? You throw it all away because you needed more. Do you even hear yourself right now?" Her lips tightened, but for the first time, she didn't have a response ready. The usual quick retort, the mocking smile, it was gone. She was finally realizing I wasn't going to bend, wasn't going to accept her weak excuses. "I trusted you," I said, my voice slower now but filled with more venom than before. "I trusted you with everything. I put you before everything. And this is what you give me in return? Lies? Betrayal?" Her eyes softened, and she tried to reach out, but I stepped back, out of her reach. "Mike, I never wanted to hurt you, I just..." "Stop." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Just stop. You don't get to play the victim here, not after what you've done." The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, until she finally spoke again, her voice quieter, almost desperate. "So what now? What do we do?" I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had promised to spend my life with, and all I felt was emptiness. There was nothing left. She had burned it all to the ground. "What we do?" I echoed, shaking my head. "I'll tell you what we don't do. We don't fix this. There's nothing left to fix. You made sure of that." Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "Wait, you're not saying..." "I'm saying we're done, Megan," I said, my voice cold. "You can pack your things and go. Stay with him for all I care. You made your choice, and now you get to live with it." She looked like she had been slapped, her mouth hanging open as the reality of what I was saying sunk in. "You don't mean that. You can't just throw everything away." I let out a hollow laugh. "Throw everything away? You're the one who did that. All I'm doing is cleaning up the mess." For the first time that night, she looked genuinely scared. Her bravado was gone, replaced by the realization that she had lost. She had pushed too far, and now there was no coming back. "Mike, Please, we can work through this, she pleaded, her voice breaking. I'll cut things off with Ryan. I'll do whatever it takes. But I didn't care anymore. Her words were empty, just like our marriage. I was done. I'm filing for divorce, I said, the finality of the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. And as far as I'm concerned, you and Ryan deserve each other. Megan's face crumpled, and for a moment I thought she might actually cry. But I didn't stay to find out. I turned and walked toward the door, my heart pounding, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. But one thing was clear. This was the end, and I wasn't looking back. I slammed the door behind me, the sound ringing in my ears, final and unforgiving. For a second, I just stood there on the porch, staring into the night, trying to steady my breath. Everything felt surreal, like I had stepped outside my own life and was watching it all from a distance. But it wasn't a dream, and there was no waking up from this. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I knew it was Megan, probably trying to claw her way back into some kind of control. But I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her spin lies anymore. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't some argument we could sweep under the rug. It was over. I got into the car and just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel, staring blankly at the dashboard. The weight of everything hit me like a sledgehammer, the reality of what had just happened crashing down all at once. I had ended my marriage. Just like that. The silence in the car felt too loud, too oppressive. I couldn't sit there anymore, couldn't be alone with my thoughts. I needed to get away, to clear my head. But there was no place that felt like home now, not after what she had done. My phone buzzed again, and this time I glanced down at it. It wasn't Megan, it was Ryan. The sight of his name on my screen made my blood boil all over again. I had cut him out of my life as soon as I hung up earlier, but apparently he still had more to say. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the ignore button. I should have ignored it, I knew that, but something in me needed to hear what he had to say. Maybe it was the rage still simmering, or maybe it was the finality of knowing I could end this whole twisted chapter with one more conversation. I answered. For a moment, there was silence on the other end. Then his voice came through, strained and nervous. Mike, man, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now, but I need to talk to you. Talk to me? I repeated, my voice low, filled with disbelief. What the hell do you think you can possibly say to make any of this better, Ryan? He sighed, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. I f***ed up, Mike. I know that. I know I ruined everything, but I never meant for it to go this far. That's your excuse? I snapped, my voice rising. You never meant for it to happen? You've been sleeping with Megan for months, and you want me to believe it just happened? Like you tripped and fell into my wife's bed? I know, okay, he said quickly, his voice desperate. I know how it sounds, but it wasn't like that. It wasn't planned. We never wanted to hurt you. I laughed, but it wasn't out of humor. It was the kind of laugh that comes when you've been pushed so far you don't even recognize your own emotions anymore. You didn't want to hurt me. You didn't want to hurt me. I repeated, my voice thick with anger. Ryan, you betrayed me in the worst possible way, and the whole time you acted like my best friend. How could you do this? There was a pause, and for a second, I thought he might actually break down. I don't know, man, he whispered, his voice shaky. I don't know. It just happened. I didn't want to feel this way, but Megan... Don't you fucking say her name, I snarled. Don't you dare try to explain this like it's some love story. You knew exactly what you were doing. You both did. Ryan didn't say anything, and the silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear him breathing on the other end, but there were no words left for him to throw at me. There was no excuse, no apology that could undo what he had done. I want you out of my life, I said finally, my voice cold, steady. I don't ever want to see you again. And if you even think about coming near me or trying to explain yourself again, I swear to God, Ryan, I will make sure you regret it. His breath caught, and I could almost hear the panic in his chest. Mike, please, don't. But I hung up before he could finish, throwing the phone onto the passenger seat like it was covered in filth. My pulse was racing, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I felt like I could barely contain the fury that was still boiling inside me. The betrayal burned like a wildfire I couldn't extinguish. For years I had trusted him. I had let him into my life, into my home. I had shared my secrets, my victories, my failures, and the whole time he was lying to me, taking what was mine, smiling in my face while he stabbed me in the back. I started the car and pulled out of the driveway, the roar of the engine cutting through the silence. I didn't have a destination, didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't coming back. Not to that house, not to Megan, not to the life I thought I was building. I drove aimlessly for hours, the night slipping away as dawn slowly crept over the horizon. The streets were empty, quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos raging inside me. My mind spun through the same questions over and over again. How could they? How could I have been so blind? But there were no answers, just the empty road stretching out in front of me, offering no comfort. At some point, I pulled into a motel parking lot, too exhausted to keep driving. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow over the cracked pavement. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I needed a place to crash, somewhere to let the weight of everything sink in. I checked into a room, the smell of stale air hitting me as soon as I opened the door. I didn't care. I collapsed onto the bed, staring up at the ceiling, the events of the night playing on an endless loop in my mind. Megan's smug face, Ryan's voice pleading for forgiveness. It all swirled together, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I tried to close my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. The adrenaline was still coursing through me, keeping me wide awake, my mind replaying every moment, every lie. I kept thinking about what Megan had said, how she had tried to blame me, how she acted like it was my fault she had betrayed me, how Ryan had said, "It just happened," like he had no control over his actions. They deserved each other, that much was clear, but me, I deserved better. I wasn't sure what the future held or how I was going to pick up the pieces of my shattered life, but one thing was certain: I was done with them, both of them. The past was dead, and now it was time to figure out what came next.
Thanks for hanging out with me on today's episode. Brother, I'm Jack, host of this podcast, and it's great having you here. If today's story hit home, send it on to a buddy who might need it. Remember, we're all in this together, turning life's curvy balls into wins. If you have an opinion or story to share, then drop a line in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. Until next time, keep your chin up and keep pushing forward. Stay strong, folks.